Welcome to Unboxing, Play and Profit for the Gaming Curious. I'm Lane Nooney.
And I'm Joost van Dreunen.
And we're here digging deep on why games matter in today's economy. On the docket today, Friday, September 26th. First up, Trump's new $100,000 fee for H-1B international workers. How will this affect the game industry? Joost would like a word. Then we're joined by special guest Colleen Macklin, freshly returned from the Game UX Summit in Antwerp. They'll give us the drop-down insights on this special event. All that and more with your two very user-tested co-hosts. But first, we've got some catching up to do. Hey there, Joost. What were you up to this weekend?
Oh, Lord, this weekend, you know...
It doesn't matter. I got to see Chapel Roan. Trick question.
Okay, you know, I was wondering, what is that all about? Tell me everything. That sounds so interesting.
You sound so convincing saying that. What you'll love is that I did it on the same day I went to the Ren Fair. So I had a Ren Fair, a Renaissance Fair morning, afternoon, Chapel Roan by night experience. My friend, one of my coworkers, got an offer to get tickets off the wait list. And so, yeah, on Friday, and the concert was on Sunday. So she grabbed them, and yeah, found myself in Forest Hills at 7 p.m. at a concert venue, which is not a thing that ever happens to me. But it felt like these are the reason. This is why you live in New York, right? Like, it doesn't matter that you're going to be tired and that you were already in another state and now you're in a different borough. Like, you just do it because why else are you here if not for these kind of random opportunities? She was amazing. Like, beautiful, very like beautiful singer, fun stage show. She is really good at that kind of projecting authenticity through a screen or a camera kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, watching like 16,000 people dance to Hot to Go was pretty fun. Can't say I didn't like that.
I'm 100% unfamiliar with any of this.
You don't know Hot to Go? You don't know the song of the summer from
I'm sure I do.
Summer? I'm
sure I do, but you know, I'm also disconnected from all this. Like, so first of all, like, where do you find this music, this artist?
The world? Yeah. Out in the popular world. Out in the popular world.
Out in the world where people wear pants, Joost.
Yes. Okay. She has had one of the fastest ascents to pop superstardom of anyone, I think in the span of 18 months. You know, it was not that long ago. She was performing to 2,000 person venues, and now that, you know, she's got her own concert tour, she's only ever cooked up one album, but she's notable for a lot of reasons. Like, she's really outspoken about having a progressive politics. She's pro-Palestine. She's queer in a whole bunch of ways. Like a lot of her songs are about women, but she's like highly mainstream. I think she really broke open at the Governor's Ball last summer. You know,
it checks a lot of boxes.
Keaton could probably, chime in better than I could, but takes a lot of boxes.
Definitive no thanks.
Rude.
From the production room.
But yeah, she was a real kind of breakout star.
Who checks a lot of your boxes? It sounds like
she checks a lot of people's boxes, apparently, because there were a lot of straight women singing about how terrible their boyfriends are at that show.
Hey, listen, that is a universal truth. Like, boyfriends are the worst. That sounds like fun. Like, you know, so you combined. Did you go in your Ren Fair get up to this?
I did, because my coworker she was like, "Oh, the theme of the conference is the theme of the concert is medieval. So I bet there will be other people dressed up from the Ren Fair." And I don't know why I believed her, but I did. I went in a cloak, and I had some like metal leather like arm greaves. Yeah, it was a whole situation.
Did you find other Ren Fair
No.
aficionados.
No,
You were just
everyone else there was in pink cowboy hats and all sorts of I mean, it was a real fashion palooza, you know. The kids were out in their best threads.
you were solo quest in this one.
Yeah. And there was
Well
also,
done.
it was very sweet. There was a lot of moms with like preteen and teenage girls. So yeah, like women who were
Interesting.
taking their like 12-year-old daughter to this show. It was really cute. There was like one right behind us. There were like several on the subway. There were like on the subway back. There were all these. There was a whole cluster of like moms with their kids' heads in their laps, like sleeping on the
Oh,
subway back from Queens. It was sweet.
that is very sweet. That's great. There's nothing like live music. I'll tell you that. Every once in a while, I stumble into a concert or performance, and it's just like it doesn't matter if it's like big, like you're describing, or small. It's just there's some electricity that makes it different. But this sounds like it's you're also sort of at the in the white hot center of cultural attention in
We'll
our
send you some MP3 links, Yost.
yeah. Please instruct me in your ways of your
Yeah,
people.
you can ask your oldest about the Pink Pony Club and the
Oh Lord. I earned some credits the other day by referring to the brain rot economy. He's like, "Oh my God, how do you know this?" Like,
How do you know about brain rot, Dad? How does he know about
he's,
the economy?
you
Yeah.
know, he's an intelligent little fella. But it's always fun to be sort of both an observer and a participant in this new cultural stuff. I did not go to anything like this. I went to the other side. I was at a restaurant called Tachana, which is this fancy. It's I don't know if it's Caribbean food, but it has like oxtail and like patties, curry, like curry goat
Yeah,
patties and stuff.
that sounds like Caribbean food.
There's West Indian. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not exclusively so, but it's like but it's very high end and very hard to get into. And so we had a
Oh.
birthday, and said birthday girl is a VIP there. So we put on a nice jacket and then spent several hours eating very rich food. It was nice, and it's by the what's it called? Where they have the operas, the Metropolitan,
By the Met?
by the Met,
By the
with all the
Metropolitan.
fountains and the lights. It's one of the sideshows there, right? And so you go there, and this is, I mean, look, here's the logistics. I have two kids, so that means that I have to have a babysitter. But then I also have to travel 45 minutes on a Saturday night into like Midtown Manhattan from Brooklyn, which is a totally counterintuitive thing to do. So now I'm already an hour in, and the clock ticks money wise. So you're like, all right. So out of the 5 hours, I spent 2 hours commuting, and you're just double charging for everything. It's just like this, but it was totally worth it. Is what I'm saying. It was nice. It
Okay.
was a sort of magical night on the town with the lights and the pictures of my wife, and it's like it was good. The last time I was there, I took the big kid to see an opera. I think it was the Magic Flute, the Zauberflöte, and that was really fun. It's like there's something about Midtown that never gets old. Like I'm not like, especially now that I live in Brooklyn, I was always downtown, so I was like, "Ugh, Lincoln Center, that's for the birds." But it's kind of nice. You should do it. You should dress up and go see.
That's
So
true. I don't go nearly enough.
once or twice a year, it's great.
You know, Yost, we've got a special guest joining us
Ooh,
in just a few minutes. Do we want to jump on to our first little discussion? Maybe just kind of like you wrote a real long read on your Substack,
yep,
right?
I did.
What the Super Yoast? What is it called?
Super Yoast playlist.
The Super Yoast playlist. That's right.
Yes.
And you decided to dig into this new H-1B situation where our fine president is going to be charging $100,000 fee for the honor of working in America to non-citizens. So you went really hard, and we'll link this out in the button down for those who want to read the full thing. But I thought we could get some top notes from you
Yes.
about this piece that I hope is going to drop some monocles all across the game industry.
It will. So I fell down this rabbit hole. That's correct. So after this
Yeah, and
lush dinner,
this is personal for you, right? Right? Because you've been on both sides of this process, right? You are an immigrant Dutchman,
I
and
am
as an
very much an
employer,
immigrant.
right?
And
You know,
so I first came to the US on like a bunch of different waivers, but then eventually you get a job and they have to justify you working there. So H-1B it is, right? It is a specialty visa that says you are of such skill. We have never seen this before in the US. We must have this person. And so your employer is the applicant and you are the beneficiary, which, creates this sort of weird
yeah,
relationship because now you have to work there to be able to stay, and therefore you can't really leave
yeah,
unless you do more
yeah.
paperwork.
It's
It's been
it's it's already fraught. Yeah.
yeah, it just but it's fair within reason in that sense. It's a long process, expensive. Anyway, so the big change last week was that the Trump administration has added a $100,000 fee, as you correctly point out, which just makes it harder. And because of that fact, like I just wanted to kind of take a look. So I fell down the rabbit hole with the USCIS, the U.S. Customs and Immigration Services, and they actually report all these numbers. Not just that, they also release these document and like related documents to petitions and where they approve or deny people, and it's interesting to see. So anyway, so you have, in other words, 85,000 H-1Bs going out annually. Only a couple hundred go to games industries in the U.S., game companies. And so I just counted it up. I did a big tally and kind of look where it hits. Did some lit review, and it comes down to like Sony, for
Yep.
instance, applying for like 154 of them last year, up from 26 a decade ago. So it's sort of like an increasing thing. It happens more often. Increasingly, in other words, do U.S. game companies rely on international talent? And if you
Yeah.
consider all that, it's like what it does, like the punchline in all this is to say that it's not about swaths of people joining the industry here, but it's about very specialized skill, which
Hmm.
directly relates to the US ability to like be innovative in games. And by raising the bar, by raising the fees, that becomes much, much more difficult.
Can you say more about how this is impacting specifically, like specific skill sets?
Right. So you have to have at least a bachelor for the basic ones, or for the specialty ones, a graduate degree. You have to also be able to demonstrate this skill in some capacity by way of being recognized. And so this is where the USCIS is a little off kilter because they look for solo performance. They look for what you did as an individual, but the games industry is mostly collaborative. So you win a BAFTA, right? You win some prestigious industry award, is you and everybody else. And they have these petitions that say, like, look, your name's not on the thing. So how would we know that you are part of any of this? The same thing with like trade press and reviews. Like, look, if you say you worked there, you say you did this, but we can't really be sure. And therefore, we can't give you an H-1B status. We can't approve the status. So, in other words, how the immigration office looks at this and how the entertainment business around gaming works is sort of counter to each other. So that creates a gate, and then there's of course it's a lottery. So it's just sort of like after all that, it's just they roll the dice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of these obstacles to jump over.
So if the US is making itself a harder place to work, kind of who then benefits globally, right? And are we already seeing that shift?
I thought you'd never asked. So I was excited about this one because it directly relates to labor. I know that that's one of your favorite things. It's the there's labor doesn't stop being around. People don't stop wanting to make games. But if you put up a giant financial wall here, making it more difficult, that talent's just going to go elsewhere. And so the short exchange is then that the US is going to lose talent and it's going to stifle innovation. And the America's loss is Europe's gain, simply put. So all of a sudden you'll start to see, and actually it took 24 hours before Germany did a very formal opening. It's like, hey, the US doesn't want you. You can come work over here. Because Germany is the kind of economy that has relied on manufacturing for a long time, is kind of slow in the uptake around like the knowledge economy and
Mm.
information businesses, and so they're trying to catch up. It's the largest European economy, so that's one of the few that will benefit from the US, basically deny people at the door.
A kind of US brain drain. Why does it go to Europe and not other regions?
I mean, it's a fair one. Europe is the one where you see a lot of investment. Europe is the one that sort of woke up in the last 5 years saying like we need to be more serious about games. Of course, they spend a lot. They're now trying to spend 4 or 5% of GDP on a country level basis on like defense and military spending. But the knowledge economy is part of that. games sort of pulls forward to that too. Scandinavia is big on it. The UK has seen this in the past be a big sort of differentiator for them, right? The UK is very well established globally. A large part of game companies in the UK rely on foreign talent, and so they're incentivized and they become more attractive to overseas talent or international talent, I should say.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's kind of predictable about what's going to happen, and you already talked about this in your newsletter, is the way this obviously is going to favor big incumbents, your EAs, your Robloxes, your companies that can afford to basically buy off the government, which is what this is. You end by pointing out that the tech giants who play along in this game, right? Who are like, okay, fine, I'll pay the heist to keep my workers, that they're still going to get burned here, right? In what ways, should we be sort of maybe advocating that even the companies that can take the hit should really put up some resistance to this rather than just playing along?
Yeah, they're boiling the frog here, right? And so it's sort of like a classic way to do it, but you just restrict labor artificially, and that gives you more control over industries. And so there's this ongoing string of concessions coming from the big companies. They can afford it. They can afford it until they can't, until they run out of runway. And so the games industry again is a small part, but most of the H-1B visas, 75% actually go to people from India. They're talented workers from India that work in the US. Most of that goes to tech companies. So if you look at the top 10, it's like Amazon, it's Meta, it's Google, it's all of those companies. So the same companies have been placating the current administration to play nice and like, oh please, here's a gold thing that's just going to make you feel good and give us a favor. They're slowly making more and more concessions around this. And the idea is, I don't have the historical background to back this up, but what it looks like and what it smells like to me is sort of like this American equivalent of the Chinese Great Leap Forward, where you're trying to basically get like a bunch of farmers to like quickly become industrialized, and it's just a terrible plot because it doesn't work that way.
So coal miners making games, like it's going to go great.
It's like is that really what's going to happen? So I think it's a very short-term, short-sighted way of doing it. And it just doesn't have any kind of clear net result here for me. It's just a bad idea. But that's just what the data says. And it's not just me. Like they did a study in 2022, basically examining restrictions on H-1B visas in the console business. So they looked at like over 1,000 game titles between 2000 2007, and it's because they don't have access to talented workers. Companies come to rely more on sort of game engines and sort of third-party software, making them less risk.
Yeah, the risk
risk-favored.
aversion part of this argument is also super interesting. Do you want to say a little bit more about that before we move on to our next segment?
The final thought then, and I see very exciting guest speaker rolled in. The final thought here is that as companies sort of mitigate risk and they now have to rely on third party, they're just going to make less investments in things that they haven't done before. And what that means is that the games industry, particularly in the US, is going to kind of fall behind on everybody else who does, right? We're in this cycle where everything is IP based and it's all about sort of steady income, trying not to break the boat as the turbulence kind of jostles us around. And so by not investing in R&D, by not investing in innovation, by making innovation more expensive, long term, you're cutting to the bone here. And so I think that that's a real loss for them.
All right, amazing. So exciting that you've done this analysis, Joost. It's so exciting you got angry.
You love labor. You love labor.
No, this is great. This is great.
Same.
Check out the link in our button down. Go read the whole thing on Joost's Substack. Transitioning to our next segment. One of the things we think is so special about Unboxing is that we're a bigger tent for conversations about games than many other game industry-related podcasts. On Unboxing, you can hear us chat with industry leaders and decision makers, but also game devs, archivists, and scholars and experts of every stripe. Unboxing isn't just about money or just fandom or just education. It is all of those things. And so we're going to be leaning in a little more in the coming months to bring you insights and experiences from the collective of folks that we're calling Pod Friends. I did not I did not workshop that.
I love it.
I didn't workshop that with Yoast ahead of time, so we'll just
No,
I'm
keeping it
hard
now.
launching that here, Pod Friends, and we'll see if it sticks. See if it sticks. That's the very professional way that we run this podcast. So today on Pod Friends, we reached out to our friend Colleen Macklin, who recently attended the Game UX Summit in Antwerp, Brussels, just a couple weeks ago, which was something, when this popped up on your social, Colleen, like I'll admit, like I was like, I don't know what this is. I'm not familiar with this conference. So we asked her if she'd hop on and give us the ground level scoop on her time there, talk to us more about the role of UX in games, which I definitely think, we could all say probably doesn't get the love that it deserves. And just for a little background on Colleen, for those of you not blessed enough to already know a little bit about them, they describe themselves on their website as a game designer, professor, and optimist. That is all true. Colleen Macklin is an associate professor in the School of Art, Media, and Technology at Parsons School of Design. They co-direct the PET Lab, which is for prototyping education and technology. They work on experimental learning and social engagement. They're a member of the design collective Local Number 12. You may know their hits, The Metagame and Dear Reader on Apple Arcade. And Colleen has co-authored with John Sharp a couple books on game design, including Games, Design, and Play, and Iterate, 10 Lessons in Design and Failure. Colleen is a friend and a giant, and we are thrilled to have you. How are you doing today?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. What a nice introduction, Lane. I am doing great. I am excited to talk about my experience in Antwerp. Now, you said Antwerp, Brussels. It's Belgium.
Yeah. Belgium. There we go.
I learned that.
Earlier today, I was looking up the relative size of all the cities in Belgium, because I was like, oh, there's a second town in Belgium besides that's right.
Yes.
There's many, in fact.
Yeah.
It's so small. Like, what are we talking about?
I mean, an incredible place too. I mean, it's been around for a long time.
Long time. And it's such a good word.
Yeah.
Antwerp.
So,
Colleen, what were you even doing at the Game UX Summit?
Well, I had the honor of presenting at the summit. Typically the hat I wear at Local Number 12 is really kind of focused on UX, really user experience and game design. And we'll talk a little bit about like, how do those things connect? They're really dovetailed together in a big way. But I wasn't talking about that work. I was actually there with a colleague of mine, Ben Van Buren, who's a professor of visual perception. He's in the psychology department at the New School. And we have been teaching a class together called Perception in Virtual Worlds. So we were there presenting some of the findings we've had in the research that our students have done in that class. And, it's like really... oh gosh, it's like molecular level interaction. It's like, how does a player compensate for things like lag? How do they understand certain little visual elements in a game? And it's almost like precognitive. This is before anyone even is thinking. They are definitely reacting, and we're taking measures from gameplay and actually running experiments on hundreds of participants to figure out more about the human brain and also more about games. Yeah, that's our thing.
Yost, do you have a question?
I don't. I think, the resume is overwhelming me a little bit.
Don't.
If I'm very honest, I remember some of your work.
I couldn't tell if your head turn was like, I want to say something, and so we're still working out the traffic here.
It's very. I'll give you this feather for your hat, which is very early on in my own writing. I stumbled across some of your work and some of your thinking, and I thought it was instructive. It's.
Oh, nice.
I come from media and entertainment, sort of the dry sense, and some of your work has really opened up sort of a broader range of narratives for me. So I like then to hear how people have progressed. And so hearing you where you are now is like, you've clearly made a huge transition over the years and sort of how you expanded, because you've been part of anything from collaborating with the city of New York to have more people in games. You've run all these academic programs and projects. So what is it that brings you back constantly to like things like UX? Like, if that's the proper question, like if that's your focal point and all this, like how do you relate that back, or is that sort of your center? Like how should I think about that?
Oh, heck yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think, first of all, you know, I'm an elder, so I've been around, and I wouldn't say that that the resume is too impressive, with the exception that it's long. And I've been working in this field for a while, and it's been just wonderful. And I would say that the reason I'm really kind of engaged at this level, first of all, I love to collaborate. Like, I think that
Hmm.
if you're working in games, you got to work with other people. And for me, that is a true joy. I have actually a difficult time sitting down by myself and getting anything done. So working with other people keeps me both on task, and it's also inspiring, and it kind of gets the creative juices going for me. But also, so I'm working with Ben Van Buren, who's a up and coming kind of researcher in this space. And he's also an avid gamer. I have to say, like, Ben plays way more games than I do. And so it's been really wonderful working with him and getting to know a little bit more about how the human mind perceives things. Because honestly, my brain is all over the place. I'm neurodiverse, and so I have ADHD and have had it my whole life. I think that's what drew me to games in a funny way. I think a lot of people in the field might relate to that. And so I'm really interested in the human psychology of games and how we learn how to play a game. And that's really at the heart of games UX. That's what we're trying to figure out, is
Mm-hmm.
how does a player kind of understand what a game is about before they even open it up? How do they
Yeah.
engage with the game, and how is it learnable?
Well, it's so funny at the beginning from this question. I didn't realize it was like a education thing
Hmm.
that drew you here. Or
Yeah.
and now that you're talking about it, I know I've heard you talk about this class before,
Yeah.
but I mean, teaching holds a big place in this podcast. We talk a lot about our classes, our students. Can you say a bit more about this class? Is it cross-listed between your two departments? Do you wind up getting students from each arena? And then what is the structure, just broadly, kind of that big, the 2, 3, 4 ways that you block out a curriculum organized around this concept?
Well, it's absolutely as you described it. It's actually cross-listed between the psychology department at the new school and design and technology, which is the program I largely teach in. It's a mix between grad and undergrad students. And the students work in pairs usually, or in small teams. And over the course of the semester, we basically just dive right into experimentation. So within the first 2 weeks, they've already sat some players down. They've observed them playing a game. We like to take indie games and also student created games as our basis for this first assignment. And they do a think aloud, which is a really typical methodology for user experience and game design. In fact, I learned about the sort of think aloud methodology for games via Celia Hodent and Catherine
Mm.
Isbister's work in this space. And actually, Celia is the chair of the Games UX Summit that we're talking about, the conference I was just at. So in that case, they just sit down and they have a player play and speak out loud about their experience. How do they understand things? We like to take games for change too, because we took a series of games from the Indiecade Climate Jam. And we asked them, well, what is this teaching you about climate change? Like, how do you understand this system and how it works? So that's the first assignment. And then we move on to more complicated things. We actually teach the psychology students how to make a
Wow.
game in Unity. We start with Pong. We keep it simple. And with the design students, we're teaching them experimental methods. So we're teaching them, how do
Wow.
you actually instrument a game so you can record certain measures, like how often players are scoring, or you can do heat maps, which is another really interesting and common thing, both used in UX for, I don't know, websites and interfaces as well as games, which is, how do you figure out where someone's either cursor or their eyes have lingered on the
Mm.
screen, right?
Yeah.
So we teach our students how to do that. And we read some of the literature in human perception. So we're really trying to understand better, like, how basically everything we see is a bit of an illusion. It's half our brain and half the light hitting our retina. And that's how optical illusions work. And so we call it perception in virtual worlds. That's the name of the class. And what we really mean is that we're kind of living in a virtual world when we're perceiving the world.
Twist.
Yep, exactly. Everybody's there. When are we going to do VR? And we do get to VR. We get there at the end, but it's like, well, wait a minute, you're in it now.
Yeah. You gotta tease that out to them, right?
That's right.
So at the summit itself, give us a kind of sketch of what kind of crowd does this draw?
Mm-hmm.
Is this industry folks? Is it a broader mix of, like, what's the size of an event like this? I saw that it's been around since about 2016. It's been hosted by some corporations previously. Bungie, it looked like, EA.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's back in Europe for the first time in a while, kind of a collab, it seems, in terms of hosting.
Yep.
What's the, what's going on here? Like, who's coming? What's happening? Who's paying for it? What's the deal?
Yeah, for sure. Well, you're right. It really kind of started, I think, Celia, has worked in industry. She's been at Ubisoft, right? She's been at Epic Games. She worked on Fortnite. She was the director of UX for Fortnite, actually. But she's also got a PhD in psychology. So she really is thinking about this sort of player brain. In fact, that's the name of one of her books. It's called The Gamer's Brain, How Neuroscience and UX Can Impact Video Game Design. So she's at the heart of all of this, right? Like, she started this whole thing, and she started it at some of the companies that she was at. And this is the first year, actually, that it was at a university, that it was hosted by an academic partner, which is kind of cool. So, it's been on and off because of the pandemic, and this was really a big reunion for everybody to have a physical conference and not just be online.
You've been before?
No, I'd never been before, and I am going again. I got to say, just like for anyone listening out there who's interested in these topics, it was an intimate enough space where you really could talk to some amazing designers and UX folks, a lot of industry. Mostly, I would say about 80% or more were industry people. You had a few researchers, more academic folks too. But for the most part, it really was industry focused. And there were a lot of, I took so many pictures of slides. Like, there's so many takeaways for me, just in because Dear Reader, our game with Local Number 12 on Apple Arcade, is very much a user interface. Like, that is so much of what it's about. And so, oh my God, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I learned at this conference that I feel like I wish I had learned back when we were making the game, but we move on and we make better things. But yeah, this was hosted by the AP University, which is kind of like a applied sciences and arts university in Antwerp. And it was also co-hosted by Gamastay. Do you know Gamastay?
I don't. I saw the names on the website, but it was a little elusive to me.
They're super cool. They run master classes, like really high level master classes for game designers.
Okay.
And folks in industry. So they do business classes too, but they're these sort of smaller, very targeted, very focused master classes. So they really provided a lot of the infrastructure for the conference. They're really great at running events. But yeah, it was a really cool collab there, and a great, as I mentioned, just like a great group of people. I would say the audience and the presenters were also incredibly diverse from all around Europe, from the US, from Asia. It was awesome. People from every company you can think of, from indie games to AAA. It was one of the more diverse conferences I've ever had the chance to attend, actually.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
So what kind of stood out to you in this context? Is there like sometimes you go to GDC and you can just tell there's like an issue everyone is stressed out about, right? Or there's like a core kind of like debate or set of issues that are being discussed. Did it have that kind of tenor to it, or was it just really wide-ranging content all around? What stuck out to you?
Oh yeah, a lot stuck out. AI was not talked about that much, actually, so that's kind of amazing.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of thought maybe this would be the year everybody's kind of fretting over AI. But what's interesting, I think, if you think about UX as a sort of dedicated, I don't know, little kind of aspect of most larger game companies, it's about translating the human part to the tech part. So it isn't as easily automated, right? It's so contextual and specific and involves like a certain level of empathy and understanding how what players say might not exactly be entirely what they mean and reading between the lines. So I really kind of I thought about that for a while, and I kind of came to the conclusion that maybe it is because this is a part of the industry that actually I don't think can be replaced with AI anytime soon. And it really is about that bridge between humans and the interface or the computer.
You reminded me of Ian Bogost and my disagreement with him. Ian
Uh-oh.
Bogost is one of these people who famously said game designers should be reading like human literature or whatever. Like they should take a class in the humanities so they could make better games.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, my rebellion against that is very simple. It's like, oh, or we could give humans tools and they could make their own games. Whatever. It seems so
Right.
obvious. But so what you're describing is the same. It's like, okay, so you have all of these tech bros building great things that are going to be seductive or performative in some capacity, trying to seem as human as possible along the way, when in fact we
Yeah.
could also just have psychologists make better things, right? If they just had the tools like learn Unity. So there
Yeah.
always seems to be this weird reversal early on where we have to like somehow arm engineers with like soul or whatever a good metaphor is,
It's a
as
little bit
opposed to just
of
listening to
that.
people.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, that is one of the themes that emerged for me there. It was really, first of all, I think the UX profession, and broadly
Mhm.
speaking, right? Like Jacob Nielsen and that whole, kind of set of methodologies, which is applied to everything from ATMs to games now. A lot of it is kind of connected to human psychology and cognition. It can be creepy because of that too, though. We have to
Mhm, mhm.
understand that if we're talking about, human psychology, we might also be manipulating it. So that was one thing that kind of emerged for me, is that, well, I don't think any of the people presenting at this conference were necessarily thinking that way. They were definitely thinking about things like retention, like what's going to get players back? How are we going to keep them in the game? How are we going to keep them in this ecosystem? And obviously that's something that you hear in all that, at
Yes.
GDC.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's
Mhm.
just the bread and butter of game design. But in this
I'm
case, yeah, I was really struck by the fact that AI wasn't a big theme, and that people were really talking about people more
mm,
than most things. But the other part to me that emerged, Lane, was there's a struggle, right? You've got UX teams in these game companies, and I think, and I might be wrong, but I think it's a relatively newer kind of emergent thing that's come out of the industry and the business side, like how they do need retention and other aspects to remain competitive. And so part of the other theme was like, well, how do UX designers integrate in these engineering teams and make sure that everybody understands the value of
this
this?
this was gonna kind of be my next question,
Yeah.
which is like, what is this UX versus game UX versus game design thing?
Mm-hmm.
Where do these people live
Yep.
inside of a game production structure?
Yep.
When do they get their hands into stuff? And I imagine the answers to that must be as varied as there are companies that
Mm-hmm.
employ UX people, like, and especially as a, you know as a teacher, right, as a professor, as
Mm-hmm.
someone whose job it is to help students get into these roles, even, right?
Yep.
How are you seeing, how do you understand the distinctions between these things, and do you have a sense of how it's often being treated versus how it could better be implemented?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, that was something that was in the back of my mind the whole time, is thinking, this year alone, for anyone studying games or technology, getting a job entry level is it's pretty bleak. There aren't a
Yeah.
lot of positions at that level. So a lot of what I was thinking about is how can I help my students better position themselves. And so where UX design sits in the game development process, I guess I would say, and alongside game design, alongside the engineering, alongside visual art, sound even,
Yeah.
because UX isn't just about what's being presented on a screen, it's what you're hearing. It really does vary from company to company, but what I will say is that on one end, it could just be, okay, you're designing the menus for the game, right? So you're designing how you deal with your inventory and that kind of stuff, right? Which,
Yes. Yes.
as we know, could always be
It's
better.
complicated and people have strong feelings about. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to get it. That getting into the pouches in The Witcher is just like, who designed this,
It
right? Like,
is
what are we doing?
really, really, really miserable. It's like, please. And so there's that, right? There's a sort of basic kind of menu UI design. But then there's also the need to really, even if you're just doing that, right? And one of the presenters, actually, Jess Butler, who is the presentation director at Hinterland Studio. You know what they make?
Okay.
They make The Long Dark. You know that game?
Yes.
Survival, classic. It's been
Yes.
around forever. So one of the things that Jess was talking about is how to make these menus integrated and still immersive. So immersion was definitely a buzzword. So how do you like not make it feel like you're stepping out to like a weird computer interface when you're actually like surviving and trying to get a light a fire with flint, So,
Yeah.
what is that balance? And she spoke a lot about sound design as a really key element, right? So if the ice is cracking, you get some visual feedback, but really the sound of the ice is so important. And so again, it kind of relates back to UI elements plus learnability. Like, how is the player understanding what they're perceiving in the game?
So when sound cues are authoring information that the player needs to learn from, right?
Yep.
And so it trains them in a certain sense to respond to an audio cue,
Yep.
perhaps even more primary than a visual cue, right? Because audio, you can tell
Exactly.
audio is behind you or it's to the right of you or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a really evocative tool for user experience that you don't see in most UX kind of curricula, right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of discussion about sound, or as much as I think there could be, but games have really brought this sort of whole media approach to things. So I think that's cool because I feel like not only are UX professionals kind of finding their way into game companies and helping companies make their games more accessible from both, from various levels of disabilities and research in that framework, but also just accessible culturally. There were some great talks about variations between preferences between Chinese audiences for games versus Western audiences. So that was super cool. And it kind of helped me understand better why we see these interfaces with all this stuff on them in Chinese games.
Yeah.
That's a preference.
Yeah.
It's about having everything in front of you, right? Instead of having to dive into another menu. So I think it was Sean Austin talked about that, who was another really great presenter. There's so many good presentations. We could spend all day. But regardless, like really the way that UX creators integrate with these teams is really varied. And sometimes it can be kind of fraught, honestly. There was a whole session on how to make yourself valuable when you're the one saying, well, wait a minute, we need to test this, or we need to see if this is accessible. And as we all know, game development costs a lot and moves quickly. So finding ways to integrate the methodologies of UX with just the necessities of the industry and how a company's always been working is something that is a big issue.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I like that example of different interfaces. Sort of like it's culturally determined in some ways. There's a clear preference, but you also have to then make it understandable. There's the classic example about billboards and like how they tell stories, or advertising is, a crying baby, a bottle of milk, and a happy baby, which is sort of famously the example that they then supplanted in a place where they read right to left, And of course, now your happy baby is made miserable with milk. So it's like that kind of like simple ideas, like localization of interface
Mhm.
and how people deal with and sort of navigate information, particularly in large volumes, is this totally undervalued critical skill that we sort of naturally like develop
Yep.
and as creators need to know, but there's no formalized curriculum or discipline around making that obvious, right? It's just like it's sort of like, yeah, you're supposed to know this, as
Mhm.
a but in fact, it's not that straightforward at all. I love that example.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, it's really important to kind of understand and check your own cultural kind of,
Hmm.
I guess, preference sets, right? Against, and work with other people from different cultures so that you can design better things, right? So don't bring your assumptions, to that table. Really, like, listen, spend some time.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Colleen, I think there's so many more questions we could ask you about this conference. Hopefully I'll be able to grill you over a drink sometime
Oh,
soon,
yeah.
if we ever
Anytime.
get you out of upstate.
Yeah.
But the question I have to sort of end this with is that, as someone who's kind of in between research, game design, education, what are you most excited to bring back to the classroom for your students?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think so. I'm on sabbatical, and I'm hoping I'm hoping what I'll bring to the classroom is a little more energy after I've rested for a bit. And that's why I'm upstate.
Excellent.
But yeah, I mean, for me, it's really that you learning methodologies, right? Like in a think aloud or in a kind of regression analysis or looking at statistics of what players are doing. You're learning methodologies that are super relevant, not just in games, but in all kinds of industries. So remain flexible, stay humble, and know that what you're learning, even though it might seem kind of abstract, right? And a lot of my students, especially undergrads, they want to just roll up their sleeves and learn code and make stuff. But like, know that like what you're learning from a design education, which at Parsons, it's all about, humans and the object and how the connection happens. Just know that those methods are going to be the things that stay the same, even though, you know, who knows what games are going to look like in 5 years or 4 years.
When you're done with sabbatical. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like at least you have these methods, you have these ways to get at understanding what a player is experiencing and why.
Amazing. That's a great place to leave it. Colleen, thank you so much for coming on the pod and sharing about this amazing trip you took and all of the cool stuff you learned. Thanks for sharing it with us.
Oh, I'm super happy to be here, and I'm hoping to go to more conferences while I'm on sabbatical because I need connection with my fellow
All right.
game people.
All right, pod friend.
I'll
Maybe
let you
we'll have
know.
you back soon.
Interface
For
with
sure.
other humans.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you.
Yes, that was a awesome conversation, and I love pod friends. I don't know about you, but
We're stuck with it now, so
you are so accommodating. You put up with so much from me. It's true.
it's not really that big of a deal.
And then he just wants to make sure I don't get, I don't think too much of myself.
No, it's like you have good ideas. It's also like what if I sit here? It's like no, I had no opinion, and I like what you suggested. I bet you'd be open to changing it if, like, halfway through, we're like, oh no, that's actually an owned title by Microsoft.
Well, I think we would have to, but
Nintendo is going to sue us if we keep saying it.
Yeah, the friend swap game, Pod Friends. All right, Yost, what do you got? You got a pwn? You got an own? What do you have?
I'm looking desperately.
I've got a pwn. There was a recent pwn that I thought was pretty funny that I could talk about while you're looking for an own.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do? Okay, sorry. I was looking at the article. So it turns out, and I caught this article on BBC News, that there was a cheating scandal in the World Stone Skimming Championships. So, which I was just like, this is so unbelievably niche. Like, I love this.
It's a
So stone
huge,
skimming,
huge.
I think it's what in the US you would call stone skipping, right? So you're looking for a kind of flat rock of a certain size, and then your goal is to kind of cast it, to get it to kind of skip the surface of a lake. And it seems like that there was a number of rocks that had been, what the quote was, suspiciously circular. And so I guess you're supposed to find the rock on the shore, but these rocks must have been planted, right? That were like ideally sized in order
Really?
to
They're
get
rigging the
a,
game.
yeah, in order to get a better kind of a better bounce and they distance, right? So there, I didn't even know that global stone skimming was a thing. So there were 2,200 people who showed up off an island on the west coast of Scotland. That must have been a crazy time. People from
2,200?
2,200 people from 27 countries came to skip rocks in like rural Scotland. And
Nobody wants to
someone
work anymore.
tried,
They just want to skip rocks.
someone fucking stone skipping scandal. I couldn't be happier. It's a
That's
pwn,
hilarious.
obviously, for cheating, but I'm just glad to know that human ingenuity don't quit.
They always find some way to cheat. I guess it's, is there like sports betting around stone skimming now too? Is that a
Let's
category?
not give DraftKings any ideas, but
Apparently, 12% of our students are on there placing
that's
bets.
right. That's right. We're gonna have to talk to him about that.
I want to extend my own this week to you, Lane. Yeah, so the exit tickets that we talked about, I implemented those. Good Lord, that's so cool. That is so helpful. Like, it's like, never mind the attendance part. That's really sort of neither here nor there for me. That's administrative. But it's like, they actually sit down and write stuff. And they're like, actually, and they'll say anything from, I had no idea, or I didn't get this part. Like, I don't understand what you meant there, all the way to like, and this other thing. And I had these ideas. And it just opens up this valve of like feedback and thought and creative thinking from my students that I hadn't experienced that way. Plus, there's something really lovely about experiencing like 60 of these handwritten notes, and they're all like trying to ooh, I want to say something to the professor. It's just really well done, and so thank you. You were the own here this week because that really like it. The struggle that I have is always sort of the same around discipline and organization, but you also want to stay motivated. This is a huge motivator for me,
Yeah,
so I appreciate you
yeah.
for that.
Thank you for giving me. I really owe the flowers for that to a good friend and colleague of mine, Jacob Gabry. This was a technique that he talked about doing in his classes, and so I sort of borrowed and cribbed it from him. But I think it's a really effective tool. And yeah, you're right. The little note part of it, where you're just trying to decipher their handwriting. Sometimes deeper in the semester, I'll get a little drawing, or
Oh,
they'll become more personal sometimes. Yeah, they're a nice little vehicle for getting a sense of where the students are at. So I definitely enjoy them. I'm glad they're working out for you too, and I'm glad that they're helping you feel like you have a deeper a connection, which is, it's easy to lose that in a big class.
yeah, 100%. It's easy to kind of spout your material and close your laptop and walk out next week, see you later, whatever. But it's talk about interface. It's like it's nice to interact with humans, right? I also don't let them use computers in the room, but you always look for that connection because like if we're gonna put on pants and commute to Midtown and come all the way out here to do all this, sit in this room, risk
You in
COVID.
pants, like
What is that? Am I
like
talking
it's
about my
like I'm
pants?
beginning to wonder if you're wearing pants right now.
Well, that's classified.
What's okay, we gotta end this segment.
I
We gotta
didn't. This is
go.
not a video pod. This is
We
just
gotta.
audio, right?
Yost just stands up in boxers. Amazing. All right.
Boxing.
Amazing. I'm glad that's working out for you. We should do a mid-semester check-in, in a couple weeks. And with that, Yost, we got anything else to do besides
Close it out.
have a good day? All right. I'm really bad at the hand hearts, the
Do
finger
you do the
hearts.
Gen Z heart or the millennial one?
can't.
I did Gen Z. See?
I'm gonna need Keaton to help me with this. Listeners, thank you for joining us. We will see you next week. Good night and good game.